my blue military credential clattered across the dashboard before I could show it to the base security officer. Arthur Hayes reached across the console of his pickup, snatched the card, and shoved it deep into his pocket while warning me not to humiliate my brother today. He genuinely believed I held a low-level office job in the Capitol, completely unaware that the card he seized belonged to a Rear Admiral in command of the fleet. For over 2 decades, my father treated my naval service as an absolute failure because I worked behind a desk instead of carrying a rifle. He openly idolized my younger brother Lucas, who was graduating as a special warfare candidate that morning. My mother Helen sat quietly in the back seat, offering only gentle silence while Arthur recited quotes about warriors and reminded me that I was a cold soul who belonged in the stands. We parked near the parade grounds where Lucas waited in his immaculate white uniform. The moment Arthur stepped out, he smothered his favorite son in a massive embrace while tossing 50 pounds of camera gear and heavy coolers onto my arms. He ordered me to carry the equipment so my brother could keep his hands free for medals, treating me like a hired laborer while the rest of my family walked ahead as a united trio. Beside the bronze memorial overlooking the bay, my father instructed Lucas and Helen to pose for a commemorative picture. When I stepped forward to join my family, Arthur extended a heavy hand against my shoulder to push me backward. He told me that this photograph was strictly reserved for those who actually served and sacrificed, ordering me to pick up the camera and take the shot, because that was the only reason I was brought along. Moments later, our former neighbor Donald approached our group and asked about my life in Washington. Before I could respond, Arthur interrupted to explain that I was merely a basic secretary who made coffee and filed paperwork in a windowless room. Soon after, a young lieutenant walking past recognized my face and began to salute. But a sharp glance from me forced him to awkwardly abort his gesture, leaving Arthur to mock me for being invisible. During the outdoor barbecue reception, Arthur held court at a central picnic table and boasted about our family line of combat veterans. When an acquaintance asked if I had ever served, my father laughed and claimed I dropped out of military training years ago due to soft hands. He handed Lucas a prime plate of smoked brisket while sliding a burnt, blackened burger toward me, remarking that desk workers did not need real protein to type memos. Humiliated, I stepped into the ladies' room to wash my face and collect my composure. Inside, I ran into Cynthia Sterling, the wife of the fleet commander, who recognized me instantly from high-level strategic meetings. She expressed shock at seeing me in plain civilian clothes and carrying heavy gear, but I quietly pleaded with her not to break my cover, prompting her to squeeze my wet hands with deep sympathy before leaving me alone. In the quiet space, escaping the noisy patio, I walked down to an old pier where cold ocean air swept against my face. Out in the harbor, massive guided missile destroyers swayed in the water, representing the true fleet that responded to my direct orders every day. I pulled out a wooden rosary that belonged to my grandmother, remembering the day I earned my first star 3 years ago, when my father refused to attend the ceremony because he was busy repairing a shed. Standing alone that night in a fast food parking lot, eating a burger in my dress whites while grease stained my trousers, I learned that unshared success feels like defeat. On the pier, 2 fighter jets roared overhead at low altitude, their thunderous engines shaking the wooden planks beneath my feet. The deafening sound reminded me of who I truly was, filling me with steady resolve to endure the remaining hours for the sake of my family. I walked back toward the auditorium just as thousands of visitors filed inside for the main commissioning event. Arthur marched down the center aisle and claimed seats in the second row near the stage, placing his heavy bag and coat over the adjacent chair to block me from sitting down. He instructed me to stand against the back wall with the camera, so I would not crowd the family section, forcing me to walk back alone. When the national anthem echoed through the hall, my body automatically stiffened to salute, but I forced my hand down to remain incognito. Down front, Arthur stood with his chest broad, proudly shouting the lyrics while pointing toward Lucas. Soon, the audience went completely silent as Lieutenant General Richard Sterling walked onto the platform, skipping his prepared remarks to scan the crowded room with sharp eyes until his gaze locked directly onto me at the far exit. The general leaned into the microphone, announcing a serious protocol breach in the auditorium. While Arthur whispered to my mother that a high politician must have entered, General Sterling pointed his hand toward the back row and formally welcomed Rear Admiral Sylvia Hayes into the room. Immediately, the commanding officer bellowed a sharp order for attention on deck, causing hundreds of graduating candidates and senior officers to instantly spring to their feet in perfect unison. 400 boots slammed against the floorboards as every uniform turned away from the stage to face me. 200 crisp salutes cut through the air, honoring the woman in the gray jacket. My father remained seated in utter shock, his face turning dark red as his phone clattered from his trembling fingers to the ground, realizing that the secretary he had belittled was the highest-ranking officer in the entire building. I returned the salute before allowing the room to resume the ceremony, though whispering immediately flooded the hall. Afterward, General Sterling walked straight down the center aisle to shake my hand and praise my strategic work, leaving Arthur shrinking in shame before the crowd. Lucas rushed past our father to embrace me with tears in his eyes, apologizing for his previous silence, but I reminded him that true warriors always stand up for what is right. Inside the truck, Arthur exploded in anger, accusing me of intentionally trapping him to cause public embarrassment. I calmly pulled out an old photograph, showing me on a hospital stretcher in Afghanistan while General Sterling pinned a medal to my uniform. I explained that I earned the Silver Star for combat bravery on the exact Thanksgiving night he called to scream at me for missing dinner, causing his arrogance to crumble as he wept into the wheel. Late that night in a quiet diner, Arthur sat over black coffee and confessed his long-held fears. He admitted that his harsh behavior stemmed from his own insecurity about never rising past the rank of sergeant, fearing my rising success would make him look small. Touching his weathered hand, I reassured him that I did not need a military hero for a father, only the man who loved me, as we shared a plate of fries in quiet forgiveness. At the airport terminal, Arthur stood tall in a new shirt reading "Proud Parent of a Navy Rear Admiral." He snapped a rigid salute as I said goodbye, addressing me by my formal title with profound respect, while I honored him as sergeant. Driving back to headquarters, I understood that true strength is not found in public noise or titles, but in the quiet capacity to protect and forgive those who fail to see our true worth.